web of conspiracy. Here is your host, Adam Webb.
Hello, welcome to another exciting edition of the Web of Conspiracy. I am your host, Adam Webb. It is great to be back with you again this week. Once again, I was off last Friday, so for those of you who are excited for a new episode, I apologize, but it was a much needed break. So I just wanted to thank everybody once again for listening. Tremendous month of February. I just cannot believe the amount of success the show has had over the last month and how much it's grown and how exciting it is. So I sound like a broken record at this point. I'm well aware of that. But nevertheless, thank you for all of you who keep coming back and listening, and to all the new listeners who have jumped on the show over the last month or two. It's amazing. And I am very appreciative and could not continue to do this the way that I do it without your support. It's invigorating, with everything else going on, and to know that there are people who are really interested in hearing what I have to say. It definitely makes it interesting, makes it exciting, and keeps me wanting to go. So it was a difficult thing for me to take a week off last week, but it was much needed after the last few months. So once again, it's great to be back. Now, for today's show, I'm just going to touch on this briefly. I'm going back to something that I did on the old program I did on the other network, long time ago now, almost a year ago. On the surface, for those who aren't familiar, they might be a little puzzled. Why are you talking about string theory? This is something with physics. Well, for those who aren't as familiar, string theory has a tremendous amount of implications involved with the paranormal and the unexplained. And I want to take some time, and I really wanted to for the new listeners, really wanted to introduce the idea of string theory. Now, I'll get into greater details in a bit, but just as a preface, I'm not a physicist. I'm a researcher. I'm a historian, originally by trade, public policy expert now. So this is not my wheelhouse. However, I've done my best to try to interpret and try to explain this in ways that are a little bit easier to understand, and really focusing on the important parts of string theory in relation to the paranormal and the unexplained. So that's my intention in doing this show, is to, for those who haven't been listening, to really be able to say, okay, now I get it, and okay, this is something that's really cool, and this does have a tremendous amount of implication for the numerous paranormal fields. So, before I get into all that, just a couple of little announcements and some things I wanted to go over with everybody. For those of you who have not yet found the website, feel free to go check it out. I try to post updates and things on there, as well as, of course, all the shows. I have all the shows archived there, as well as the latest shows, so that way it's easy to find. So if it's just easier for you to go to and find the show that way, then feel free to listen to it right there on the website. That being said, the show is also available on Stitcher. For those of you who didn't know, I've talked about this now quite a few times, and certainly Stitcher has helped to promote the show tremendously. But by all means, if you have the Stitcher app, check us out on Stitcher. For those of you who've been listening on Spreaker, that's awesome. I appreciate it. I know a number of you listen to the show via the podcast downloads on iTunes, and that's awesome. And whatever it is that's most convenient for you, but I just try to make sure that for everybody out there that there's a number of different ways you can get the show. So feel free to check that out. Also check out the social media pages. I try to do some stuff there from time to time, and not as been as active as I would have liked in the last couple months, but really trying to focus more on the content of the programs, and I haven't been able to do as much of the promotioning of the show, there on the social media, but I'm there, and I try to stay at least a little active as well. Then one other thing, I haven't talked about this. I haven't been really talking about this as much lately, but if you have, any type of of questions or things or topics or anything that you would like to hear on the show, please feel free to email me at web, that's 2 B's, webofconspiracy@gmail.com. I'd love to get your feedback on the show, as well as, here's the other thing too. I would love to be able to do a show in the coming weeks on just listener experiences. That was a big thrust into why I wanted to start this show. Was I really wanted to create an open format for people out there who don't feel like they can talk to their friends or their neighbors because they don't want to get looked at as, oh, well, you're just weird because you think this happened to you. You know, I have learned over the years, and certainly from my own experiences, there's a variety of people from many walks of life who've had strange, unexplained things happen, and they search for avenues to try to express it, and often are kind of shunned, or and the whole point in this is that I want to be able to give an avenue for people who feel like they cannot openly discuss it. So if you have some stories, and if you don't want me to share them on the air, I don't have to, but I would love to be able to share them with other people in the audience who know, okay, I'm not crazy. There's nothing wrong with me. These kinds of things happen to other people too. That's the whole point, and a big part as to why I did the show. Not to mention, I wanted to enlighten some people on some things going on, especially when I talk about some of the things that are going on in the government, certainly some of the things in governments worldwide. Now, yes, I do focus on the United States. It's where I'm at, and it's what I know most, but I think it's important for people to be informed, to know just what's going on, and to not just get fed the mainstream media's, happy pills, so to speak. Just the blinders to only the celebrity gossip sections of the news. It's ridiculous. Really know what's happening out there, and I try to talk into that, and hopefully going forward I'm going to expand and bring in some more of those programs as well. But I would love to get listener feedback as well as listener experiences of all kinds. So please feel free to email me at webofconspiracy2bs@gmail.com. Now, today's show, as I mentioned, I think that this is fundamentally, perhaps, has the most potential for understanding paranormal phenomenon that we have. I think it is perhaps the greatest scientific explanation of paranormal phenomenon, and it's called string theory. Now, for those of you who are completely unfamiliar with string theory, okay, it is essentially what many people in the paranormal field believe, that this could be a unified theory of the paranormal. I know many people have probably heard this discussed before in some respects, but that's the kind of potential that string theory has for the paranormal field. It's much like Einstein's effort to discover the unified theory of everything. That there's not been any proven breakthrough, but this is as close to being able to explain a lot of the unexplained that are out there. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a physicist, and I will do my best to try to explain this in ways that become easy for people to understand. This is a highly conceptualized thing, and for people who are hands-on learners, this is probably going to be difficult to really grasp, because it is very a conceptual idea, and you have to really kind of think in terms of outside of your typical constructs, so to speak, for those who have not had much physics, education of any kind. Now, string theory is heavily grounded in physics. It is a physics theory. It came out of the physics realm, but many people in the paranormal began to realize that what this theory in physics has potential to explain a number of paranormal phenomenon, and as well as potentially a number of other phenomena, such as extraterrestrial, any kind. I mean, really, it runs the gamut in terms of what it can possibly explain. So, what is string theory? Well, the string theory, it's a number of parts, but the part that we're going to look at specifically is what's known as M theory. Now, this M theory, don't worry about the title because it doesn't really matter that much. But M theory contends that there are actually 11 dimensions. Now, dimensions, we live in a 3D world in terms of what we conceptualize as a 3D world, right? We have, what we can touch. We have the three dimensions, the height, the tangible three dimensions, the 3Ds, right? So, aside from that, what these physicists believe is that there's actually 11 dimensions. It's the other dimensions that we can't tangibly touch, that we can't see, that there are actually these other dimensions in our own reality, layered, that we have no way to be able to touch or feel or see or be able to acknowledge with our actual senses, our normal 5 senses. Now, these dimensions, this theory argues, have membranes that separate them. Really thin layers of this, and they really don't have a real good way of describing it other than describing it as a real thin type of membrane that separates each dimension. Now, it argues that all matter in the multiverse. Now, that's the key here, multiverse. This theory argues that there's actually a multiverse and that there's several universes constructed inside this one multiverse. And that all matter in the multiverse is constructed along these strings. Now, you have to imagine just these invisible strings running through everything. Okay? And I realize that's really heady kind of stuff. It's like, wow, At any rate, if you can visualize just a number of different strings invisibly running through everything that we know, okay? These strings can be closed off and creating a loop, or they can be opened and running completely through and along things. Now, it's argued and believed by these physicists that multiple closed strings can be connected, okay? And that these connections make tunnels. The best way to describe what these tunnels are what many people who've had at least some idea or have heard this before, the term wormhole, right? That these multiple closed strings can be connected to create wormholes, where many scientists believe we can go into a wormhole in one part of the universe and exit out at a completely different part of the universe. And many believe that that's perhaps the best way that we can engage in interstellar space exploration, is by somehow channeling these wormholes. Now, the twisting of these strings, on the other hand, it's argued, can manipulate time. That if we can find a way to twist these strings that we cannot see, that perhaps we can move forward or backward in time by doing this. Now, okay, so let me take a little bit here. As I said, some of it's kind of really out there and really heady stuff. But what we're looking at here is that this part of the theory leaves the possibility of time travel and leaves the possibility of interstellar space travel in ways that we never dreamed physically possible by our current technologies. Okay, we're talking about space travel in across the universe in a fraction of the time, and we're talking about time travel, the possibility that we could go forward in time, or even though I know there are many physicists who argue that it's really impossible to go backward in time, this theory leaves that, well, perhaps there is a chance. Okay. Now, these closed strings, okay, they can travel between the membranes and are the open are often confined, but what happens is that when you get these infinite numbers of membranes and possible wormholes, it's possible that these layers, layer over top, And there's other things going on in this universe right around us that we cannot recognize, as it's layering over top of everything else. We're just not able to perceive in that. There's just these infinite numbers of membranes and possible wormholes, meaning that there could be wormholes almost everywhere. We just cannot see them. Okay? Now, the implications here, okay? This is where things get interesting. We have all of these different membranes and these strings, these universes on top of each other, touching each other, dimensions touching each other everywhere, okay? The implications for the paranormal, for cryptozoology, UFOs, it's the afterlife. It's tremendous what this could possibly explain. It is theorized that where these membranes meet, that there's holes that open, right? Or that things can cross from one dimension to another, or momentarily be visible, or as a way of moving between dimensions, or moving between universes. Okay? So when we're talking about, say for instance, cryptids, right? We're talking about, say, Sasquatch, or a number of these other cryptids that have been described, Mothman, the Chupacabra, okay? All these creatures that that many people claim to see, that there's very little evidence of in terms of a lot of physical evidence, but many people have experiences, many perfectly normal people. So it is theorized that perhaps where these membranes meet and touch, that these cryptids that we see are actually coming through to our part of the dimension or our part of the universe in that moment in time, but aren't actually something that we normally are able to visually see. Okay? That perhaps these are beings, these cryptids are what many refer to as interdimensional beings, right? That they are capable of moving between dimensions because they have figured out and understood the way that the universe works, that there's these points in the universe, in our dimensions even, where we can cross between, or that some of these beings have the ability to move between dimensions because they're at what many people argue a higher level of creation, that they can actually move between dimensions without needing to have a hole in the membrane, or that they have learned how to create the holes, okay, and that they can move in between. So perhaps these cryptids have found these places, or where they've been able to sort of for moments come into our universe and then leave when it feels threatened, okay? Or they just have the ability to move between dimensions, and that they don't move from between universes, but they're still there. We just can't see them. Now, for many people, that's a little bit of a scary thought, that there could be something in your home right now with you that you cannot see, you cannot touch. It may be one of these unknown entities. It could be watching you the entire time, or it could be living essentially with you, and you would never even know it unless it wanted you to know, or could move to your dimension, decide to show itself. Now, right there, that presents a classic possibility of haunting and paranormal phenomenon, right? When people report hearing these strange noises or seeing things quickly, all these strange beings. I talked a few weeks back about the shadow people. What if the shadow people are interdimensional beings and they're there with you the whole time, and only when they want to be seen, or they, for one reason or another, decide to show themselves to you, if it's to intimidate you or scare you, whatever the case may be? Or what if there's these beings, perhaps they're physical, but perhaps they're not. Perhaps they are demonic, as many people often suggest, or malevolent beings. Or perhaps they're just some other type of entity that Some are good, some are bad. Some will do things to seemingly help, as many people report having beneficial experiences with the paranormal, or they're there to cause damage. Perhaps these beings are really no different than us, that there are some of us who are good in our basic nature and some who are not so good in our basic nature. Perhaps they're there this entire time, moving amongst us, and just operating on a different dimensional level. And we have no way to perceive that dimension. That opens up a number of discussions about the afterlife. Perhaps when we die, that is what happens to us. We ascend to this different dimension. Maybe that's what the afterlife is all along. The idea of a heaven or even a hell are just different dimensions that we're unable to see or unable to tangibly get to until we leave a physical form and our energy becomes something else. And we become something else. And at that point, we then learn that we're dimensional and that we move into this different dimension that we call heaven. But if we want to, have the ability, some of us, or maybe even most or all of us, to move back into the earthly realm to visit those we've left behind. And that opens up a tremendous pantheon of opportunities for discussion about the reality. Perhaps there really is an afterlife. Perhaps we can scientifically prove that at this point. It would seem that we're heading in that direction anyways. Another distinct possibility, as I touched on a moment ago, are extraterrestrials and UFOs. What if extraterrestrials and UFOs really are interdimensional beings, right? That they just operate in a different dimension and have learned either have the ability to by themselves just naturally from their form move between dimensions, or they've learned how to move between dimensions using technology. There again, there's always the possibility that these extraterrestrials have learned how to, using the string theory, have learned how to open membranes from one part of the universe to the other, right? They've mastered the ability to create wormholes along these strings and use these tunnels to move in and out of our frame of reference, our planets, whatever the case may be. At a moment's notice, they can come. At a moment's notice, they can leave. Right? Many people describe when they see UFO phenomenon that it almost appears though that they just blink out. In a blink of an eye, they're gone. That they travel incredibly fast speeds. What if they have mastered the technology described in string theory, have learned how to open up these strings and move and create wormholes, create tunnels in the multiverse to go from one universe to another, from one galaxy to another. And that is how they've mastered the ability to travel across space. It is a mind-blowing possibility to think that scientists are this close, and I know you can't see, I'm doing a visual here, but are so close to possibly finding tangible proof to some of this phenomenon, or at least tangible explanation for some of this phenomenon. Now, yes, much of it is just a theory, okay? But this, and the one thing I haven't talked about yet, I've talked about the afterlife, I've talked about extraterrestrials, I've talked about ghosts, I've talked about cryptids, all of these things possibly having an explanation grounded in string theory. But what about the idea of a God? You know, there are many of us who believe in God and believe in an all-powerful being that is omnipotent. But it would seem that string theory could possibly even explain this as well. The question that dictates this is, what moves the strings? What is the thing that essentially what is often referred to as vibrates the strings? It's as though they're being plucked like the string of a guitar, right? Something, it would seem, there's some force, at any rate, that vibrates the string to make what grows, what appears, what develops along these strings, whether it be a tree or some other type of biological life form. It is believed that it's all done by vibrations along these strings. Perhaps there is some sort of all-powerful being or force that is vibrating the strings at a frequency to determine what becomes along those strings. It's a mind-blowing possibility. Once again, this theory is early in its inception, relatively speaking, but there is a tremendous amount of possibility with this theory. Unfortunately, as I said, it's impossible to prove at this point. While it has been proven mathematically, and that's the thing. That's the starting point for a lot of scientists, is that they have proven mathematically that the string theory is sound. Okay, that there is something here, and for anybody who is familiar with science to a certain degree, understands that mathematics appears to be at the basis of everything that we live in. Everything has mathematics. Everything is mathematically related. So, this theory has been proven mathematically, leading some credence to, okay, maybe this is something more than just a theory. As I said, it's unfortunate that we are not in a place where we can physically prove it. We haven't developed technology to move between dimensions. We haven't developed the technology to create our own wormholes as of yet. I know that it's being worked on. I know there are scientists who are currently working on trying to master and develop that technology. But as of yet, it hasn't been done. So, a lot of information here, right? We have the potential to have multiple dimensions layered over us that we can't see. That multiple universes are touching our universe that we cannot see. And that what we have to do is learn how to master these strings. And then by mastering these strings, we could either move between multiverses, universes, we could move between dimensions, we could even, for those, and for the record, we could move between time. We could move among time. We could move forward and backwards in time. Now, time is considered by many one of these dimensions. So, if we can learn how to vibrate the strings, right? If we can learn how to manipulate and vibrate the strings, if we could do this, we could produce any type of energy or matter that we should so desire. We could create anything if we learn how to vibrate the strings. This could be, by doing this, one of the single greatest achievements mankind has ever made. I would argue that if we do figure out how to do something like that it would be the single greatest achievement by mankind. We could create anything. We could create any kind of matter, energy that we should so desire. We would become creators in many respects, right? If you believe that there is an omnipotent God, an all-powerful God, and that this God is the person who, or entity that vibrates the strings, then by us learning how to vibrate the strings, then we ourselves become creators, do we not? A lot of ethical concerns in this as well. If we were to master that kind of potential, what would we do with it? Well, we've proven in the past that when we have learned how to harness tremendous power, that we don't always harness it for the good. Now, that's unfortunate, but it is true. It's at our nature that we tend to create things that aren't always beneficial. Nevertheless, we could create new limbs. We could do so many things. We could survive in our form almost endlessly. It is an amazing idea that has proven mathematical constructs. However, we just don't, as of yet, have the technology to make it real. But string theory, this idea that the universe has multiple universes that are running along, that everything has strings running along it, and that if these strings are constructed in such a way that you can open up parts of the universe by creating wormholes, that you can move between dimensions, that there is in fact a distinct possibility that there are beings on other dimensions that have the capability, operating at higher dimensions, to see us, but we can't see them, to interact with us, but we cannot interact with them. It's almost overwhelming, but in the same respect, it has tremendous potential in explaining all of the strange phenomenon that many in the paranormal field have been trying to determine a source for decades, if not hundreds of years at this point. This could explain everything in our universe. It could explain everything in the multiverse. It is, without a doubt, one of the greatest theories in terms of the paranormal. It has the most potential. The ability to move between dimensions. The ability to move between universes. It could all be right at our fingertips. When I had come upon this theory a long time ago, it intrigued me. And it intrigued me for all of these reasons. It intrigued me in that it could explain so many things. It is tremendous in its ability to explain a number of unusual paranormal phenomenon. It can explain ghosts. It can explain an afterlife. It can explain UFOs. It can explain cryptids. It can explain even the possibility of time travel. It's all right there. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we capable of truly harnessing this power in a way that would be beneficial for all mankind? Well, I don't know. I don't know that we are. I don't know that if we do develop the technology that we'll be able to use it in any kind of a way that is beneficial. I would argue that you looking at the powerful, the wealthy, the governments in the world that would see this as a tremendous threat to have this kind of technology, or see it as a tremendous weapon, an advantage over others, that it's possible that maybe we already have the technology and it's just not being disclosed to the public. Now that would be a game changer. Now I don't know whether or not that's true or not, but if it were, that would change everything. And before I close out the show, when I did the show last time, I included this quote from Albert Einstein, and I'm going to do it again because I think that it is essential in terms of discussing string theory and the potential that's there. This is at the heart of what it is that anybody who researches the paranormal really, this string theory is there, and this quote I think encapsulates that ideally. Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Do not stop questioning. By continuing to question, we are beginning to find answers. Answers to even psychic phenomenon, right? perhaps those among us who have psychic abilities are, in some way, shape, or form, are able to see in these different dimensions or into these different universes. That's an amazing thought as well. But for those of us who do this kind of work, who research this stuff, who are field investigators, we cannot stop questioning. That is how we'll find definitive truth in all of this phenomenon. So, well, that's all I have for you this week. Once again, thank you to everybody who keeps coming back and listening to the show. Hopefully I didn't go into something that was a little too overwhelming for most, but I think that it's at the core of what is going on in terms of the paranormal and the unexplained. So I felt like I had to go back to this topic once again. So I want to thank everybody for listening. I appreciate it. And tune in next week. I'm going to be doing a show on the Bermuda Triangle. And perhaps that can even be explained by string theory as well. So we'll check that out then next Friday. Until then, have a great week.